They say a mother's love is blind. But what do you do when the darkness you see isn't in your own heart, but in the eyes of the child you raised? The evening air in our isolated, modern house, perched precariously on the cliff overlooking the Pacific, was thick not with fog, but with an unspoken tension that had been building for months. My name is Alara Vance, and I am, or at least I thought I was, a successful architect and a loving mother. The central character in this unfolding tragedy is my son, Julian, a brilliant, quiet 19-year-old who should have been starting college on the East Coast, but was instead here, sharing my solitude and, as I would soon discover, secretly planning my demise. Our house, the Sentinel, was a fortress of glass and steel, designed by me to let in the light, but lately it had only amplified the shadows. Just last week, on my 52nd birthday, Julian had given me a gift that now sat on my desk, gleaming under the weak lamplight. A hand-carved wooden jewelry box. It was beautiful, a dark mahogany piece, and he'd spent weeks on it. Yet when I opened it, there was a faint medicinal smell like antiseptic or something sterile, and the inside felt slightly tacky. I'd dismissed it as the newness of the finish. I wish I hadn't. That jewelry box, I now realize, wasn't a gift of love. It was the first piece of a perfectly laid trap, a silent promise of what was to come. A tiny, almost imperceptible scratch was visible near the hinge, a sign of something being tested or applied. It was the first time I felt a cold dread, a feeling that something fundamental had broken between us, a connection I'd spent 2 decades forging. The house felt huge and empty, the vast ocean view mocking the isolation within its walls. Hey everyone, before we dive deeper into Alara's chilling discovery, please take a moment to drop a comment below telling us the time and where you are watching from. We want to know where the Sentinel story is reaching. Also, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this intense story with any friend who loves a compelling mystery. Your support keeps the lights on here. Now let's continue. The inciting event, the moment the chill turned to an absolute freeze, happened the day before yesterday. Julian, always meticulous, had been working on his laptop in the living room. He'd left it open when he went to the kitchen for water, a highly unusual oversight for him. I passed by the screen, intending to close it to save the battery, but the title of the active document flashed across the screen. Vance Estate Transfer, Finalizing Contingency. My heart hammered. Contingency? Julian had no access to my estate. I had my finances locked down, and my will was simple. Everything goes to him eventually when I decide to retire or, well, when I'm gone. I stood there frozen, the screen's blue light reflecting in my wide, disbelieving eyes. It was a professional document, not a note. I felt a tremor of nausea, a dizzying sense of the floor shifting beneath me. The screen then refreshed to an open browser tab, a search result from a few days prior. Fast-acting, untraceable poisons in common household items. The air suddenly felt too thin to breathe. My son, my brilliant, quiet Julian, was researching how to kill me. He wasn't just planning for a future inheritance. He was planning to accelerate it. I quickly closed the laptop, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. When he returned, holding his glass of water, his face was a mask of calm, a calmness that now felt utterly terrifying. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice flat. "I must have forgotten." I managed a strained smile, a lie I hoped he didn't see through. "Of course, sweetie. Don't waste the battery." But inside, the fortress I had built for our family had just been breached. I knew then that I wasn't just living with my son. I was living with an increasingly patient, increasingly clever executioner. The beautiful jewelry box on my desk wasn't just a gift. It was an integral part of the trap, a small piece of a much larger, sinister mechanism. The scratch near the hinge, the faint smell, they were clues I had ignored. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, trying to rationalize it. It had to be a school project, a dark fiction piece, a coincidence. But the combination of the estate documents and the poison search was too specific, too cold. Julian had also recently begun asking unervingly specific questions about my daily routine, my medications, and my upcoming travel plans. Just yesterday, he'd casually asked if I'd switched my daily vitamin brand. I hadn't. He'd followed up by saying he'd read a study about how certain vitamins can have dangerous interactions with common painkillers. I only take an occasional mild painkiller for my chronic shoulder tension. That night I didn't sleep. I got up at 3 a.m. and went to my study. I opened the jewelry box and, using a small, unused dental mirror and my phone's flashlight, I inspected the inside under extreme magnification. Near the lining, hidden under a thin layer of lacquer, I found a residue. Not varnish, but something crystalline, applied and then thinly sealed. I was no chemist, but the sheer effort of concealment spoke volumes. It wasn't just research anymore, it was action. The trap was set. My son had crossed a line, a final, irreversible boundary. He wanted me dead. And now the hunter had become the prey. But the prey was not going to wait for the final, fatal bite. I looked out at the dark, turbulent ocean. The cold resolve settled in my chest. I had to act first. The question wasn't if I could survive, but how I could do it without destroying the small, flickering memory of the innocent boy Julian used to be. The sun rose on the Pacific, painting the sky with violent streaks of orange and purple, a reflection of the turmoil in Alara's soul. She was running on pure adrenaline and fear. Her first action, even before making coffee, was to secure the unsettling gift. The mahogany box was now wrapped in a silk scarf, placed inside a zipped pouch, and locked in her fireproof safe, a temporary fortress for the evidence. She had to ensure Julian did not realize she knew. From this moment on, her life was a performance, a terrifying charade of the devoted, oblivious mother. Julian came down for breakfast, his movements quiet, almost ghost-like. He sat across the long marble island, scrolling on his phone. Alara watched him pour milk, noting the slight tremor in his hand that he quickly concealed. Was it nervousness, or was he already calculating the next phase of his plan? "Morning, Mom," he said, without looking up. "Good morning, Julian," Alara replied, her voice sounding unnaturally bright. "Big plans for today? I was thinking of heading into the city, maybe check on the West Wing construction." This was a lie. She hadn't set foot in the office in 3 days. She was testing him, seeing if her absence would throw a wrench into his timeline. "Oh, that's fine," he replied, finally looking up. His eyes, the exact shade of seafoam green as her own, were utterly opaque. "I'll be busy too. I need to calibrate my telescope equipment. The lunar cycle is perfect for the exposure I want tonight." Telescope equipment. The words sounded innocent, a teenager's hobby. But Alara's architect mind immediately connected it to the untraceable poisons search. She recalled the faint, sterile smell from the box. She thought of laboratories, precise measurements, and specialized instruments. A telescope was Julian's cover story, but what if his lab wasn't outside, pointed at the stars, but inside pointed at her? Alara left the house at 9 a.m., driving her black SUV away from the cliffside, but instead of taking the freeway toward the city, she pulled into a hidden, overgrown turnoff half a mile down the coastal road. She watched her house for 30 minutes through binoculars. Julian's car remained parked. The trap was still active. She returned home, slipping in through the rarely used laundry entrance. She had a window of perhaps an hour before Julian would expect her to call, if he expected her to call at all. She had to find the equipment. The house was vast. Where would a meticulous, scientifically minded 19-year-old hide a small, temporary chemistry or toxicology setup? Not the garage, too public. Not his bedroom, too obvious. The basement? No, it was damp and unfinished. Then she remembered. The old darkroom. When Alara designed the Sentinel 10 years ago, she'd included a small, soundproofed room on the second floor, originally meant to be a photography darkroom, complete with specialized ventilation and a water supply. She hadn't used it in years, and Julian knew this. It was the perfect out-of-the-way space. She crept up the stairs, her heart thudding against her ribs. The darkroom door, a solid oak slab, was usually unlocked. Today it was locked, and a tiny, almost invisible piece of clear packing tape had been placed across the door jamb, stretching from the frame to the door's edge. Julian wasn't just hiding his work, he was also tracking intrusion. If the tape was broken, he would know she'd been inside. This level of calculation sent a fresh wave of paralyzing horror through her. Alara, the architect, knew her own house better than Julian knew his own mind. She didn't need the key, and she didn't need to break the seal. She went to the study and retrieved her original, scaled blueprints from the safe. She didn't study the door, she studied the ventilation system. The darkroom's specialized vent shaft ran vertically up the wall and connected to a larger air duct leading to the main attic space. A space rarely used, accessible only through a pull-down ladder in the guest hallway. Using a small folding ladder, she pushed up the attic hatch and climbed into the dusty, cramped space. The air was dry and smelled of old wood. She crawled toward the location marked on her blueprints, the darkroom vent shaft. It was covered by a standard metal grill. With a screwdriver, she carefully removed the grill. The shaft was about 10 by 10 inches. She lowered her phone, set to record video down the shaft. The light was poor, but the camera could see. The video feed was shocking. The darkroom wasn't a darkroom anymore. It was a sterile, miniature laboratory, organized with chilling precision. On a workbench, the telescope was indeed present, but it was dismantled. The heavy aluminum tripod was draped with a sheet. Next to it, however, was the equipment that screamed toxicology. A digital microscale, an electronic balance accurate to 4 decimal places. This wasn't for weighing rocks, it was for measuring potent, small doses of something. Glassware and stirring rods. Several beakers and vials, some still smeared with a faint, oily residue. A small, heated magnetic stirring plate was unplugged nearby. The compound, on a small steel tray under a glass dome, was a tiny, clear jar labeled with a handwritten, almost elegant script. P42A. This was not an accident. This was a formula, a signature. Alara zoomed in on the phone's screen. P42A. She knew instinctively it was the residue she had found in the jewelry box. It was a custom, calculated, and likely synthesized compound, one that might not show up in a standard autopsy or toxicology report. Julian wasn't buying poison, he was making it. He was turning his advanced chemistry and engineering knowledge, the very intellect she had paid a fortune to cultivate, into a weapon aimed at her heart. She gently brought the phone back up, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it in the dust. She had the proof. Video proof of the hidden lab and the formula name, P42A. The trap was not a single event, but a slow, calculated process designed for maximum control and minimum trace. He wasn't planning a sudden death, but a gradual decline, a poisoning that would look like a natural, unfortunate illness. The jewelry box was merely the delivery mechanism for the initial, undetectable dose. Alara replaced the vent cover, secured the hatch, and stood in the guest hallway, leaning her head against the cool wall. She was filled with a cold, terrifying resolve. She wasn't fighting a misguided boy anymore. She was fighting a genius-level assassin who just happened to be her son. She had to get the formula name to a trusted source, a chemist, a toxicologist, before Julian's P42 found its way into her food, her water, or her daily routine. Alara knew that any sudden, unexplained trip would raise Julian's sophisticated internal alarm. She had to engineer a perfect alibi, one that was both believable and slightly irritating, something that would keep him busy and focused away from her absence. She returned downstairs, acting the part of the slightly flustered, demanding client. She approached Julian, who was now back on his laptop, looking like the picture of studious innocence. "Julian," she announced, trying to keep the tremor of terror out of her voice, "I have a colossal crisis with the West Wing project. The structural engineer, a man named Mr. Thompson, just sent me a frantic email. Apparently, there's a critical issue with the foundation piles. They're settling faster than projected due to a miscalculation in the soil density report." Julian looked up, his brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of genuine concern mixed with professional interest. "Piles? That's major, Mom. What kind of miscalculation?" This was Alara's chance. She had to make the crisis so detailed that it would require his analytical mind to distract him. "It's beyond me, honestly. It involves these complex differential equations." Thompson sent me the original report and the new data, and it's a mess of figures. I need an expert eye to spot the error, or the whole project might be delayed. She handed him a thick stack of printed, heavily marked-up papers that she had pulled from a spare briefcase. Old blueprints and soil reports from an entirely different finished project. I have to drive into the city immediately to meet with the site manager, she continued, pushing her acting abilities to their limit. It's a 3-hour drive, and I'll be back late tonight, maybe even early tomorrow. I need you to go over these figures. If you can pinpoint where Thompson went wrong, we can save millions and get back on schedule. You know how good you are at this kind of calculation. The appeal to his intellect was the perfect hook. Julian despised professional sloppiness, and his ego appreciated the challenge. Okay, he conceded, taking the papers with a focused intensity that made Alara's stomach clench. Give me the next few hours. I'll cross-reference the shear load values against the settlement data. Don't worry, Mom. I'll find the flaw. Thank you, sweetie, she said, managing a kiss on his cheek that felt like pressing her lips against ice. I owe you. I'm leaving right now. Alara drove out of the gate, but this time, she didn't stop until she was 30 miles inland, far away from the coastal cell towers that Julian might have hacked or monitored. She pulled into a desolate rest stop, checking her rearview mirror multiple times for a tail. She didn't use her primary cell phone. Instead, she took out an old, disposable flip phone she kept in the lining of her emergency roadside kit. The kind of simple, non-trackable device people thought was obsolete. She dialed the number she hadn't called in 5 years. Marcus was her former chief engineer, a man in his late 50s with the quiet intensity of a bomb diffuser. He was fiercely loyal, not because of money, but because Alara had saved his career during a messy professional scandal years ago. He was retired, living a quiet life on a small ranch, far from the world of architecture and toxins. The phone rang twice before a gruff, familiar voice answered. Hello. Marcus, it's Alara. You need to listen, and you need to believe me. Everything I'm about to say is real. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of rustling fabric. Alara? You sound like you're reading a classified memo. What's wrong? It's Julian, she whispered, her voice cracking. He's trying to kill me. He has set a trap, and I need your specialized help, right now. I have proof, but I can't go to the police. Not yet. I need to know what he's using. Marcus was silent for a long moment. He didn't laugh or dismiss her. Start from the beginning, Alara. Use simple language. What did you find? Alara quickly recounted the laptop screen, the inheritance document, the poison search, the jewelry box residue, and finally, the hidden darkroom lab with the digital scale and the ominous jar. She took a deep breath before giving him the most critical piece of information. The compound is labeled Marcus. It's written on the jar. It says P42A. I have a video of it. Can you start a search on that? Is it a known nerve agent, a custom synthesis? What is it? Marcus's voice, when he finally spoke, was low and heavy with recognition, not surprise. P42A, he repeated. Alara, if that's a compound name, it's not an off-the-shelf toxin. The P suggests precursor, or polymorph. The A often means acute. But combined with a number like 42, it points to a specific, custom synthesis, likely based on alkylating agents or perhaps a modified amatoxin structure. He paused, clearly thinking. These types of toxins are favored by people who want a slow, undiagnosable kill. They damage cellular DNA over time, mimicking severe organ failure, specific cancers, or even fast-acting neurodegenerative disease. They are designed to degrade the victim from the inside out, making them look like natural causes. The jewelry box wasn't meant to kill you instantly. It was meant to start the process, the small, initial dose that would look like a sudden, mild flu or chronic fatigue. The chilling clarity of his explanation made Alara clutch the phone tighter. So, he wants me to die slowly, Marcus. He wants it to look natural. Yes, Marcus confirmed. He wants time. Time for the poison to work, and time for the paper trail on your estate transfer to look legitimate by the time you're gone. This is highly calculated, Alara. He is building the perfect crime, and he's using high-level chemistry to do it. I need you to find everything on P42A, or anything resembling that structure, Elara urged. What is the antidote? What is the countermeasure? I can't go back to that house without a plan. I can't do this search from my house. It would flag every security agency in the country, Marcus stated, his professional instincts kicking in. I have a secure lab facility, an old friend's private chemistry firm in the city. I'll be there in 2 hours. I'll start the reverse engineering search right now using shielded networks. But I need one thing from you, Elara. Anything, Marcus. You need to bring me a sample of that compound. A microscopic amount. I need the actual physical evidence to run a spectrometer analysis. The structure of that molecule will tell us everything about its function, its dosage, and the precise counteragent needed. I can't fight an unknown enemy. Elara looked at her wrist. It was now late afternoon. Julian expected her to be in the city. The problem was, going back to the house to retrieve the sample meant breaking the tape seal on the darkroom door, and potentially facing Julian before she had the antidote. I can't get into the lab without Julian knowing, she confessed. He has it sealed. I have the jewelry box, but I'm worried the residue is too small for proper analysis. The jewelry box might have been the first dose, but the primary stock is in that jar, Elara, Marcus insisted. You have to get a sample of P42A. Until then, you are under attack. Do not consume anything he prepares. Do not use any product he may have touched. And Elara, do not let him see that you know. He has to believe he is winning. Understood, Elara whispered. I'm heading to the city now. I'll check into a downtown hotel to maintain the alibi. I will find a way to get that sample and bring it to you by tomorrow afternoon. Be ready, Marcus. We are fighting a chemical war against my own son. She hung up, her hands still shaking. She was no longer just the prey. She was now the counterintelligence agent, tasked with infiltrating her own home to steal the evidence of her own attempted murder. She started the SUV, not towards the West Wing construction site, but towards the city, towards the first step of her defense. Elara arrived in the bustling, impersonal environment of downtown Los Angeles, a sharp contrast to the cold, isolated beauty of the Sentinel. She checked into a high-end, anonymous hotel using her maiden name and paid with a credit card that wasn't linked to any joint accounts with Julian. She needed absolute separation. As soon as she reached the sanctuary of her hotel room, she pulled out her primary phone, the one Julian expected her to be using, and saw a text message that sent a fresh wave of icy terror through her. It was from Julian, sent only an hour after she had left the coastal area. Julian, Mom, I'm stuck on the soil reports. Did you take the old laser measure device? The one with the green beam? I need the exact height of the utility crawlspace access door to cross-reference the original foundation elevation. I know you sometimes keep it in the emergency kit in the SUV. Elara stared at the text. It seemed innocuous, a simple request related to the architectural problem she'd set up. But her emergency roadside kit, the one containing the disposable burner phone she'd used to call Marcus, was located exactly next to the laser measure device in the SUV. Julian wasn't asking for the measure. He was subtly confirming two things. She hadn't returned home yet, since the kit was still in the car. He knew exactly what was in her emergency kit, meaning he'd gone through her car. The tremor was back, starting in her hands and traveling through her body. He wasn't just planning her murder. He was running constant surveillance. Every move she made, every lie she told, was being analyzed and cross-referenced by the most brilliant mind she knew. He was always one step ahead. The laser measure was a veiled message. I know where you hide things, Mom. She quickly typed a response, maintaining the facade of a stressed architect. Elara, no, sweetie, I think I left the laser measure on the shelf in the laundry room. Don't worry about the elevation numbers. Just focus on finding the equation flaw. I'm tied up in a nightmare meeting. We'll talk later. She was sending him on a small, harmless errand, checking the laundry room, to keep him occupied while she formulated her plan to return and retrieve the P42, a sample. She needed to be back at the Sentinel tonight and be gone before dawn. Alara spread the old blueprints of the Sentinel across the hotel desk. Marcus was right. She couldn't risk breaking the tape seal on the darkroom door. It would immediately signal to Julian that she knew about the lab, collapsing her entire defense strategy and potentially forcing his hand to a more rapid, violent conclusion. She focused on the darkroom's construction, specifically the wall shared with the adjacent closet in the master suite's exercise room. Soundproofing, she muttered to herself, tracing the wall structure with a trembling finger. The darkroom needed absolute light and sound isolation. To achieve this, she had specified a double layer of dense drywall separated by a narrow air gap designed to absorb vibrations. However, for maintenance access to the specialized plumbing and wiring on the closet side of the wall, she had included a feature that only the original architect, her, and the main contractor, long retired and in another state, would know about: the utility access panel. It wasn't a standard ugly panel. It was a section of the closet wall precisely 3 feet by 4 feet, held in place not by screws, but by high-tension industrial-grade magnetic strips, completely flush with the surrounding drywall and painted over to be invisible. A specific, strong magnetic pull tool, designed to look like a simple piece of metal shelving hardware, was required to lift it out. It was a secret door, hidden in plain sight. The problem? The pull tool was in the back of the architecture studio on the ground floor, locked in a heavy-duty tool chest. She couldn't afford to be seen rummaging around the studio either. She had to get creative. Alara devised a meticulous, terrifying plan. She would drive back to the house tonight, under the cover of darkness, retrieve the key equipment, and use her knowledge of the house's infrastructure to execute a clean, silent entry and exit. Step 1. The distraction. She called the local power company and, using a prepared script and claiming to be a neighbor, reported a flickering power issue around her exact cliffside coordinates, emphasizing that it seemed focused around the main utility pole near the Van Cess property. She knew the power company often did a brief, unannounced, low-voltage check in the area when a report came in, which would cause a slight, momentary dip in power, enough to potentially confuse any local power monitoring devices Julian might have set up. Step 2. The equipment acquisition. Before driving back, she purchased 2 items: a powerful, small rare earth magnet, far stronger than the magnetic puller tool she'd designed, and a small, professional-grade jewelry repair kit, for the necessary tools to extract the P-42, a sample. Step 3. The cover of night. She drove back to the Sentinel, arriving around 11:30 p.m. The house was a dark monument against the moonlit ocean. Julian's light was off. He was either asleep or, more likely, pretending to be. Alara parked her SUV far down the road, away from the motion sensor lights. She approached the house on foot, moving silently across the landscaped lawn, feeling more like a burglar than the homeowner. She used a service key to enter the back utility room, an entrance Julian rarely used. Her first target was the studio tool chest. She used her unique key to unlock it and retrieved a pair of specialized, non-metallic, high-resistance tweezers and a clean glass microvial from her architectural supplies, perfect for collecting the sample without contamination. Silent as a ghost, she ascended to the second floor. She passed Julian's darkened bedroom door, holding her breath, listening for the slightest sound of movement. Nothing. She entered the exercise room and found the closet. It smelled faintly of rubber and clean sweat. She located the wall that backed onto the darkroom. She placed the powerful rare earth magnet she had bought against the approximate location of the hidden access panel. There was a faint thunk. The magnetic attraction was strong. She began to gently pull, inch by painstaking inch. Using the tremendous leverage of the magnet, she eased the 3-by-4-foot section of the wall away from the frame. It made no sound, just a slight rush of displaced air like a sigh. The hidden wall panel was open, exposing the inner guts of the structure. She had breached the darkroom without breaking the tape seal on the main door. She pointed a small, powerful flashlight into the gap. She was looking at the back of Julian's workbench. She had to be precise. The P-42, a jar was visible sitting under the glass dome. Using the long, thin, non-metallic grabber tool from the jewelry kit, which she had prepped with adhesive tape on the tip, she reached through the narrow gap. The tension was unbearable. A misplaced movement, a sudden noise, and her cover would be blown. She had to steal the very poison designed to end her life. Alara's heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic, loud drum in the absolute silence of the house. Through the narrow gap of the hidden access panel, she had managed to carefully secure the small jar labeled P-42, using the adhesive-tipped grabber tool. With infinite slowness, she lifted the jar back through the hole. It was tiny, holding only a few grams of crystalline pale yellow powder, enough to ruin countless lives. She transferred a microscopic pinch of the powder into her prepared glass microvial, sealed it immediately, and secured it inside a deep, zipped pocket in her jacket. The primary jar of P-42 was then carefully lowered back into its original position in Julian's lab. She now had the evidence Marcus needed. The most dangerous part of the mission was complete. Now she had to reseal the wall. Using the strong magnet, she began to guide the heavy access panel back into its frame. It was a perfect fit, designed by her own hands, and it slid back almost silently. Almost. As the magnetic strips clicked back into place, the faintest, low-frequency thump echoed in the stillness. It was barely audible, but in the crushing silence of the night, it sounded like a cannon shot to Alara. Before Alara could retrieve the magnet and retreat, the unthinkable happened. The quiet whisper of Julian's bedroom door, 2 rooms down the hall, creaked open. Alara froze. She dropped the large magnet silently onto the floor of the closet and pressed herself back against the hanging clothes, trying to meld with the darkness. She could hear the soft, padded footsteps of her son moving down the carpeted hallway. He wasn't heading for the stairs or the bathroom. He was walking straight toward the exercise room. Alara's mind raced. Why was he up? Did he hear the thump? Was this part of a planned check? He was wearing dark pajamas, and his shadow stretched long and distorted under the faint glow of the emergency hall light. Julian entered the exercise room. He didn't flip on the main light. He simply stood in the doorway, about 10 feet from the closet where Alara was trapped. Then he began his chilling late-night routine. He didn't speak. He didn't search. Instead, he started walking a slow, precise perimeter check of the room. He wasn't just walking, he was feeling the walls. He walked past the rowing machine, then past the weight bench. When he reached the corner where the hidden access panel was located, he stopped. He raised his hand and, with a terrifying slowness, ran his fingertips across the freshly reset drywall. He was checking the seams, the texture, ensuring everything was perfectly flush. His hand paused exactly where the magnetic seam was. Alara held her breath until her lungs burned, her jaw clenched tight. She was close enough to smell the subtle scent of antiseptic soap Julian always used. She felt a profound wave of helplessness and terror. This was not a boy. This was a machine of precision, and she was trapped inside its mechanism. He didn't detect the flaw. The design was too perfect. After a heart-stopping pause, he continued his slow sweep around the room. Then Julian moved toward the closet door, the sliding mirrored door behind which Alara was pressed. He opened the closet. Not wide, but just enough, a 4-inch gap, to cast a sliver of hallway light inside. He wasn't looking for her. He was checking the tape seal. Alara realized that earlier in the day, when she told him she was heading into the city, he hadn't just checked her car. He had likely secured multiple monitoring points, including placing an invisible, hair-thin piece of fiber tape across the lip of the closet door as well, knowing it was the only other access to the darkroom wall. Julian reached into the gap and ran his finger along the top edge of the door, where the seal would have been. He felt for the delicate resistance of the tape. Alara knew the tape was intact because she hadn't opened the closet door. She had used the architectural panel. But Julian's sheer meticulousness was the trap itself. He didn't have to catch her. He just had to confirm his traps were undisturbed. Finally satisfied, he allowed the mirrored door to slide shut with a soft final snick. Julian didn't leave immediately. Instead, he stood in the center of the exercise room, completely still. He raised his wrist to look at his watch. A new, expensive model Alara had bought him for Christmas, the one she now knew he wore while performing his chemical calculations. Then he walked back to the darkroom door, the solid oak slab that had the first tape seal she noticed. He pressed his ear against the wood for a moment, listening. After a few seconds, he whispered, barely audible, a sound that made Alara's blood run cold. "The calculations are all confirmed, Mother. Just a little more time." He wasn't talking to her. He was talking to the silent walls, to his hidden lab, or perhaps to the poison itself. He was announcing the success of his current phase, believing he was alone. The absolute, chilling detachment in his voice solidified everything. There was no hesitation, no guilt, only the cold, hard logic of a scientist finalizing a complex experiment. He didn't wish her dead. He simply calculated it. He finally turned and walked back down the hall, his footsteps fading away until his own bedroom door closed with a decisive, soft click. Alara waited 5 minutes, her body rigid, tears silently tracing paths through the dust and sweat on her face. The air in the closet was suffocating. She slowly, shakily, opened the closet door just enough to slip out. She secured the powerful magnet and the rest of her tools, her movements jerky with shock. She then crept down the stairs, out the utility room, and back to her car. As she drove away, she looked back at the Sentinel, a fortress of glass and steel that had become the most dangerous place on Earth. She had the sample, the crucial piece of evidence that could save her life, but Julian had just confirmed her greatest fear. He was fully aware, fully calculating, and fully committed to her demise. She had to get the P-42A to Marcus and prepare for the next phase, the phase where the prey fights back. Alara drove straight through the pre-dawn hours, the microvial containing P-42A clutched tightly in her jacket pocket. She didn't trust herself to stop or sleep. The memory of Julian's whispered declaration, "The calculations are all confirmed, Mother. Just a little more time," played on an endless, chilling loop in her mind. She arrived at the outskirts of the city and located the address Marcus had texted her. A nondescript industrial park housing a small, discreet chemistry firm. Marcus was waiting in a darkened office, looking older and grayer than she remembered, but his eyes held the same unwavering focus. "You got it," he stated, his voice flat with urgency as he saw the small, sealed glass vial Alara handed over. He didn't ask about the risk she'd taken. They both knew it was the only way. Marcus led her through a labyrinth of sterile hallways into a small, secure, and impeccably clean laboratory. He immediately placed the microvial's contents under a sophisticated mass spectrometer and gas chromatograph. "This is complex analysis, Alara. It will take time to reverse engineer an antidote, but the initial scan, the spectroscopic profile, will tell us everything about its base structure and mechanism within minutes." As the high-tech equipment hummed, Alara finally collapsed onto a stool, recounting the terror of the previous night. The silent infiltration, the magnet, the whisper, and Julian's meticulous, emotionless check. Marcus listened patiently, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder in a rare moment of comfort. "He's not a killer, Alara. He's an engineer, and you are a problem to be solved with the highest level of efficiency. That's what makes this so dangerous." Within 15 minutes, the computer screen began to populate with complex, twisting molecular structures and data points. Marcus zoomed in on a specific graph, his expression turning grim. "It's worse than I thought," he said, tapping the screen. P-42A is an incredibly sophisticated compound. It's a derivative of a known, non-lethal industrial chemical, but Julian has added a specific alkylating group, which is the key to its toxicity. It's designed to be ingested or absorbed. He turned to Alara, his voice softening with professional gravity. "The poison isn't meant to cause acute failure. It targets the mitochondrial DNA in high-energy consumption organs, specifically the liver, kidneys, and muscles. It slowly damages the energy factories of the cells, mimicking severe chronic autoimmune disease or untreatable progressive muscular atrophy." "What are the symptoms?" Alara asked, her throat dry. "Subtle at first. Persistent fatigue, muscle soreness, maybe trouble focusing. Then a progressive, untreatable muscle weakness that makes daily tasks impossible, leading to a slow, irreversible decline that every doctor would label idiopathic, meaning they wouldn't know the cause. He has designed a poison that creates the perfect, natural-looking, terminal illness. Alara immediately thought back over the last few months. The sudden, unshakable exhaustion that coffee no longer cured. The heavy feeling in her arms and legs after climbing the stairs at the Sentinel, a house she designed to be easily navigable. The occasional dull ache in her kidneys, which she'd blamed on dehydration. She hadn't just been stressed, she had been poisoned. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. "Marcus," she whispered, "over the last 3 weeks, I've been feeling this heavy muscle fatigue. Not soreness from exercise, but a deep, constant weakness. I keep forgetting simple words, too." Did the jewelry box? Marcus looked at the data screen, then back at her face. "The fact that you are experiencing subtle but constant muscle fatigue, Alara, confirms my initial fear. The jewelry box wasn't just a threat, it was the initial vector. You absorbed a minuscule dose, perhaps through residual powder on the wood, or maybe he wiped the contact point with an oil-based carrier. It's a low enough dosage not to kill you, but high enough to start the process. The poison is already active in your system. It's a race against time now." The silence in the sterile lab was deafening. Alara was not just fighting an assassin. She was fighting a disease created by her own son, a ticking clock inside her own body. "Okay, forget the antidote for a moment," Alara said, rising from the stool, her weakness momentarily overcome by sheer determination. "What do I do now? How do I fight back when I'm already sick?" Marcus nodded, already formulating the defensive strategy. "We have to assume the next, larger dose is imminent. He has confirmed his calculations and knows you're still alive. He is expecting you to return to the house and get sick. We need to disrupt his entire hypothesis. You cannot go back to the Sentinel. Not even to retrieve your things," Marcus instructed firmly. "If you vanish, he will assume you're sick and perhaps isolated yourself, or worse, that the poison worked and you died alone somewhere. He will wait for your body to be found, or for news of your collapse." "I have to disappear," Alara concluded. "Cut off all communication, all banking, and leave no digital trail. I have to make him think I'm simply gone." Marcus pulled up a satellite map of the region. "I have a small, isolated cabin in the Sierra Nevada foothills. It's off-grid, no cell service, no registered address. It belongs to my retired partner, who is currently out of the country. It's completely secure. You will go there and wait. I will work around the clock here to develop the counteragent for P42A." He pointed to the screen where the molecular structure of the poison glowed menacingly. "Your defense now is not confrontation, Alara, but withdrawal. You must make him believe the trap worked, only partially. This gives us the time we need to find the cure, and, more importantly, to set our own trap." Alara looked at the terrifying image of the poison on the screen, then at the map showing the secluded cabin. She had gone from being a successful architect to a fugitive fighting a creeping sickness, all at the hands of her son. The first part of her plan, getting the evidence, was done. Now came the long, lonely wait for the cure and the strategy to turn the tables. "I will go to the cabin," Alara agreed, her voice resolute. "But Marcus, when I come back, it won't be to run. It will be to end this, one way or another." Alara's new home was a small, rugged cabin nestled deep in the Sierra Nevada foothills, a fortress of rough-hewn timber and silence. It was deliberately primitive, wood-burning stove, no running water, only a spring nearby, and most importantly, no electricity beyond a few solar-powered lanterns, ensuring absolutely no Wi-Fi or cell signal. It was the digital blackout Marcus had promised. The first few days were a blur of aching muscle fatigue and deep, overwhelming despair. The P42, it was already working. Climbing the short, steep path to the spring for water left her winded. Her hands, which once drafted intricate architectural plans with tireless precision, now trembled from the effort of stirring a simple cup of soup. She had to conserve every ounce of energy, knowing every ache was a symptom of the poison attacking her cellular machinery. She began a strict regimen Marcus had supplied. High doses of powerful antioxidants and specific coenzymes known to support mitochondrial function, a desperate attempt to slow the poison's destructive march until the specific counteragent could be formulated. This was not a cure, only a stall. Alara filled her days by revisiting the blueprints of the Sentinel, tracing every line and joint, searching for any potential weakness she could exploit when she finally returned, not just to retrieve Julian, but to ensure his entire setup, physical and digital, was neutralized. She was preparing for the final battle, knowing her own physical strength was rapidly deteriorating. Meanwhile, back at the Sentinel, Julian noticed his mother's absolute silence. Alara's phone, which she'd left powered off in the glove compartment of her SUV, parked 30 miles away at an anonymous airport lot, remained dark. Her credit cards were dormant. She hadn't responded to his texts, not even the ones where he innocently updated her on the fake structural flaw he was supposedly solving. A normal son would have called the police, alerted her business partners, or at least driven to her office. Julian did none of these things. Julian exhibited a terrifying, almost inhuman calm. He wasn't panicked, he was pleased. He sat in the living room, looking out at the vast ocean, the silence of the large house echoing around him. He reviewed his initial projections for P42A's timeline. The small, initial dose was designed to cause progressive fatigue and neurological confusion within 3 to 4 weeks. Alara's sudden disappearance after only a few days didn't suggest she had discovered the trap. It suggested she was already deeply affected and had withdrawn, possibly believing she was coming down with a sudden, mysterious illness that was forcing her into isolation or, more conveniently for him, a quick, remote collapse. "Right on schedule," Julian murmured, rotating a glass of water slowly in his hand. He wasn't celebrating. He was confirming a successful hypothesis. The early onset suggests a higher initial absorption rate than the models predicted. Good. He began the next phase of his operation, a phase that demonstrated his complete lack of conscience. Julian knew a prolonged absence meant an eventual police investigation. He needed to ensure that when the time came, the paper trail confirmed his narrative. That Alara had been in a state of professional and mental decline, leading to her withdrawal and ultimately her unfortunate end. First, he used his advanced coding skills to access Alara's professional email accounts and subtly plant evidence. He composed several draft emails, dated over the last few weeks, to her partners and site managers. These emails were filled with erratic instructions, claims of crippling stress, and mentions of debilitating physical fatigue and unbearable pressure. He never sent them. They were simply left in the drafts folder to be discovered later, painting a picture of a mind spiraling out of control. Second, he moved to finalize the estate transfer. He opened his laptop, brought up the Vance estate transfer document, and modified the contingency clause. Instead of relying on a death certificate, he changed the trigger condition to, upon the sustained and verifiable absence of Alara Vance for a period exceeding 30 days, declared by a certified legal professional as functionally missing and unable to manage affairs. This was the terrifying next step. He was leveraging her disappearance to finalize the murder by proxy. He didn't need a body, just 30 days of silence to legally claim the estate. Julian stood up, walking through the silent house. He paused at the darkroom, checking the tape seal he had applied to the main door. It was perfectly intact. He smiled, a small, cold, proprietary movement. The integrity of his trap was still confirmed. The idea that his mother could have infiltrated his space without breaking his seal never even entered his mind. It was an impossibility based on his knowledge of the locks. He would spend the next 3 weeks living alone in the vast house, maintaining the facade of the worried, but intellectually busy son. He would wait for the 30-day deadline to pass, at which point he would call the family lawyer, express grave concern, and begin the legal process of having his missing mother declared unable to manage her affairs, the first step in claiming the fortune. He was so confident in his poison trap and his digital camouflage that he felt zero pressure to search or confess. He was simply waiting for the inevitable, clinically clean conclusion of his experiment. Alara, miles away, resting her aching head on a pillow of pine needles and rough fabric, felt the poison working. She knew time was the enemy. She was fighting a silent chemical clock while her son was leveraging a chilling legal clock. She had to get the antidote before the 30 days were up. If Julian gained legal control of her assets while she was still fighting for her life, he would win completely. Days bled into weeks at the silent mountain cabin. Alara measured her survival by the slight easing of her muscle tremors and the clarity of her thought processes, which she attributed to the massive doses of Marcus's prescribed mitochondrial support. But the fundamental weakness persisted. She was living on borrowed time, battling the slow, progressive damage caused by the P42A. The clock was ticking toward Julian's 30-day legal deadline. The only physical connection to the outside world was a small, high-powered radio Marcus had left her, tuned exclusively to a single, secure frequency. She could only receive messages, not transmit. On the morning of day 21, the radio crackled to life, startling Alara from her tense contemplation of the house blueprints. Marcus's voice, distorted but clear, cut through the static. "Alara, I have the counteragent structure. It's an enzyme complex. We call it A19. The good news, it's a specific, rapid reversal agent for P42A. The bad news, to synthesize it, I need a specific, extremely rare catalyst. It's called iridium-94 complex, I-94. It's non-commercial. I have tracked the last known private stock to a retired chemist, Dr. Alastair Finch, who specialized in rare earth compounds." Alara clutched the radio, her heart pounding. "Finch lives completely off-grid, even further remote than you. He runs a heavily secured private research bunker near the old Mojave Missile Range, Eastern California. I can't contact him. His security is impenetrable, and I can't breach my own digital silence. Alara, you have to go there. You must travel on foot and persuade him to give us the I-94. I've left a map and coordinates hidden under the large flat stone by the cabin's chimney base. Time is critical. I'm running on empty here. Good luck, Alara." The radio went silent. Alara stumbled outside and, with trembling hands, found the map Marcus had left. Dr. Finch's bunker was over 70 miles away, across rugged, unforgiving terrain. The journey was a crucible. Alara had to traverse steep canyon trails and arid wilderness, relying solely on a backpack of scant supplies, her compass, and her rapidly dwindling physical reserves. The P42A made every step an act of pure, agonizing will. Day 22. She covered only 8 miles. The muscle weakness was crippling. She stumbled often, catching herself only by leaning on a makeshift hiking stick. The simple act of ascending a rocky incline left her gasping, her limbs shaking uncontrollably, forcing her to rest for hours under the sparse shade of juniper trees. She felt the poison working, draining her energy with every fiber of physical effort. Day 23. She started experiencing minor cognitive lapses. She forgot the direction of the setting sun for a moment, an elementary mistake for an experienced hiker. This subtle neurological symptom confirmed Julian's sophisticated design. The poison wasn't just physical, but mental, designed to erode her capacity to fight back. Day 24. She was forced to abandon her main water carrier after a small fall. She simply did not have the strength to lift it back into her pack. She had to rely solely on small streams, increasing the risk of contamination. She realized, with a chilling clarity, that if she had to run or fight, she would lose instantly. Her architect's mind was sharp, but her body was rapidly failing. She pushed on, fueled not by food or water, but by the cold, fierce resolve to survive and stop Julian. Every step was a prayer and a curse, a desperate effort to defy the sentence her own son had passed on her. On the evening of day 27, exhausted, dehydrated, and barely able to stand, Alara spotted a faint, pulsing light in the distance, Dr. Finch's bunker. It was not a welcoming farmhouse, but a concrete structure built into the side of a granite massif, shielded by heavy-gauge chain-link fencing and topped with barbed wire. The security was formidable. She reached a formidable steel gate, flanked by remote cameras, and managed to activate a rusty, antique speaker box. A dry, ancient voice answered. "State your business." "No solicitation. No trespassing." "My name is Alara Vance," she gasped, leaning heavily on the fence, trying to sound stronger than she felt. "I need to speak to Dr. Finch about Iridium 94 complex. It is a matter of life and death, and it is related to Marcus." The voice was silent for a full minute, calculating. "Marcus is a name I trust, but you are dehydrated and look dangerously weak. You are a liability. If this is truly life and death, you must answer one question. The compound you seek is a catalyst. What specific reaction is it required to accelerate in the A19 synthesis?" Alara was momentarily stunned. She had never been a chemist, and Marcus hadn't shared the specific mechanics of the antidote's synthesis. She felt the dizziness from the P42A, induced fatigue and dehydration clouding her mind. But then her architect's training, her meticulous nature, kicked in. She remembered Marcus's note on the analysis screen back in the lab. The P42A is an alkylating agent, attacking the mitochondrial DNA, Alara whispered, fighting to project her voice. The counteragent A19 must involve a highly energetic chelation process to strip the alkyl group before it binds permanently. Iridium 94 must be catalyzing the terminal bond cleavage to create the enzyme complex. A long silence followed. Alara waited, swaying on her feet, the world spinning. If she was wrong, the gate would remain closed, and she would collapse and die, just days shy of Julian's deadline. Finally, the old voice returned, tinged with grudging respect. "Come in, Ms. Vance. You can tell your story inside." A heavy mechanical groan signaled the unlocking of the thick steel gate. Alara stumbled through, collapsing onto the concrete floor just beyond the threshold. She had reached the antidote's key ingredient, but her weakened body was nearly spent. She was in Dr. Finch's hands now, but the 30-day deadline and Julian's quiet confidence still loomed large. Dr. Finch, the quiet, meticulous chemist, stabilized Alara and, after hearing her unbelievable story, was convinced. He was a man who understood the cold logic of science, and Julian's scheme was terrifyingly logical. While Alara recovered slightly in the austere, clean environment of the bunker, Marcus arrived by helicopter. A risky, last-minute decision that shattered his isolation but was necessary for rapid synthesis. He had secured a temporary, untraceable flight and landed in the remote clearing near Finch's compound. Using the rare Iridium 94 complex from Dr. Finch, Marcus worked for 36 frantic hours, synthesizing the A19 counteragent. The resulting compound was a clear, slightly viscous liquid. The antidote, the physical key to Alara's survival. Marcus administered the first, stabilizing dose of A19 intravenously. The effect was almost immediate. The crushing muscle fatigue began to recede, replaced by a subtle, deep warmth. Alara felt a surge of energy, the first flicker of her old strength returning. "The A19 is working," Marcus confirmed, watching the monitors. "It's binding to the P42A's active alkylating group, preventing further cellular damage. You need several more doses, but you are physically stable for now. We have bought ourselves time, but not much." It was day 29. Julian's 30-day legal deadline was less than 24 hours away. With her mind cleared by the antidote, Alara and Marcus used Dr. Finch's advanced, secure network to access Alara's bank records and digital security protocols. All strictly read-only, to prevent alerting Julian. "Julian is clean," Alara muttered, reviewing the access logs she had secured before leaving. "He hasn't touched the estate funds yet. He's waiting for the legal trigger tomorrow." "He's too smart to rely on one contingency," Marcus warned, his gaze sweeping over the network schematics of the Sentinel that Alara had pulled up. "If he thinks the P42A failed, he needs a guaranteed, untraceable backup." Alara focused on the structural plans, specifically the water filtration system. The Sentinel used an advanced, multi-stage reverse osmosis system, which Julian had expressed unusual interest in recently. "Look at this," Elara said, tapping the diagram of the main water line, which ran directly into the kitchen faucet and ice machine. Julian rerouted the plumbing bypass last month, claiming the pressure sensor was faulty. But he installed a small, custom-built filtration module after the main filter. It's tiny, maybe the size of a fist. I assumed it was for trace minerals. Marcus zoomed in on the specifications of the small module, and his expression turned to ice. "No, Elara. This isn't a mineral filter. Look at the flow valve rating. It's designed for high-pressure, single-dose delivery." He designed an automated secondary trap. "What is it, Marcus?" "If he sensed a disturbance, or if you showed up unexpectedly and looked too healthy, he would activate a silent digital trigger. That trigger would release a single, massive, lethal dose of a fast-acting neurotoxin, likely stored as a dissolved solid in that module, directly into the drinking water line leading to the kitchen and the ice maker. It's an emergency kill switch." The chilling clarity of Julian's backup plan was stunning. He hadn't only planned for her slow demise, he had prepared for her unexpected survival, too. If Elara walked back into the Sentinel and innocently grabbed a glass of water, or used the ice machine, she would be dead within minutes. "It's the ultimate trap," Elara breathed. "If I return, I'm drinking my own execution." "We can't just storm the house, Elara," Marcus said grimly. "We can't rely on the police. Julian's evidence of your mental decline will confuse them, and the toxin in the water will leave no trace after the filtration system flushes it. We have to neutralize both traps, the legal one and the physical one." Elara, feeling the steadying influence of the A-19, stood straight, the architect's focus returning. "I know the house. I know his security patterns. And I know Julian's greatest weakness, his over-reliance on perfect digital control. The 30-day deadline is the key. He will be on his laptop at exactly 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, preparing to initiate the legal declaration of my disappearance. He will be focused on the screen, feeling absolute certainty. We need a distraction, a disruption that pulls him away from the house long enough for us to disable the water trap and secure the evidence," Marcus stated. "No," Elara countered, shaking her head. "No distractions. I go in when he is most focused. I'll use a weakness in the Sentinel's infrastructure he never considered, the emergency weather siren system. That system is separate from the main network," Marcus realized. "It's an analog sound-based alarm built to override everything in the event of a rogue tsunami warning. He can't silence it digitally. What are you going to do?" "I'm going back tonight. I have one final dose of A-19 to keep me strong. I am going to trigger the siren at 9 a.m. sharp. He will be legally, mentally, and physically jarred. That will give me the 3 minutes I need. I am going to end this trap the way I started it, with my own hands. Julian set a trap to end my life, but he never expected me to act first. And now, I am going to prove him right." Elara, now armed with the A-19 antidote and a cold plan, arrived back at the Sentinel just before dawn. She bypassed the outer security, climbing the sheer rock face of the cliff behind the house to access a rarely used, high-level maintenance hatch, a route only the architect would know. She was inside the house's framework, moving through the cold, narrow crawl spaces and utility conduits until she reached the second-floor wall that housed the main siren control panel, hidden behind a library shelf. At 8:58 a.m., she could hear Julian's quiet tapping coming from the living room below, the sound of a genius preparing to sign his mother's death warrant. At 9 a.m., just as Julian was undoubtedly moving his mouse to confirm the estate transfer, Elara smashed the emergency glass cover and pulled the manual override switch for the siren. The sound was immediate, deafening, and violently invasive. The high-pitched, warbling alarm designed to warn of natural disaster flooded the glass house, overwhelming every sense. Julian's typing stopped instantly. He screamed in pain and surprise. The noise was debilitating. Elara could hear the sound of his chair scraping back as he rushed to find the source. Elara burst from the crawlspace, slamming the heavy library shelf back into place. Julian, clutching his ears, stood in the hallway, his face a mask of shock and fury. He hadn't expected her to be alive, much less standing there, healthy and resolute. "Mom! How are you here?" he yelled over the siren, his calculation finally crumbling into raw panic. "The calculations were confirmed, Julian," Alara shouted back, quoting his own chilling whisper. "But you forgot the one variable you couldn't control, the architect who designed the house." She didn't hesitate. She ran straight for the kitchen, knowing Julian would chase her, but her target wasn't him. It was the second, more lethal trap. Julian followed, shouting, "You were supposed to be sick. You were supposed to be gone." Alara reached the complex plumbing area beneath the kitchen island. As Julian lunged for her, she dropped to the floor and, with the immense strength the antidote had given her, she pulled the main water shut-off valve with a grinding, metallic crunch. Water pressure dropped instantly, rendering the lethal injection module useless. The moment the water was secured, Alara stood up, facing her son. He was breathing heavily, his features contorted in disbelief. "It's over, Julian," she said, her voice steady now, the siren still screaming around them. P-42A neutralized. The water trap disabled. The estate papers stopped. Julian stared at her, his composure finally shattering. He didn't rush her, he didn't attack. He looked at the disabled water valve, then at his mother, and the reality of his failure hit him. "You went into the darkroom. You saw it," he whispered, a broken, defeated realization. Alara reached into her jacket and pulled out the small, sealed glass vial containing the P-42, a residue, her ultimate proof. She held it up. "The trap was set, Julian. But I acted first. And now the law will handle the rest." A sudden wave of quiet descended as the siren, its power finally exhausted, died with a sputtering whine. The sudden silence was more jarring than the noise. Just then the front door burst open. Marcus, following Alara's prearranged signal, and equipped with 2 local police officers he had met at a neutral location with irrefutable evidence, entered the house. Julian looked at the police, then at Alara, then at the vial in her hand. The mastermind was finally caught, not by a mistake in his poison, but by a flaw in his environment, a flaw he had overlooked because his confidence was absolute. The moral of the story: Julian's attempt to use cold logic and science to solve a personal problem, his inheritance, led to the ultimate moral failure. The brilliance he was given was not used to build, but to destroy. The final moral lesson of Alara's story is this: there is no amount of genius, planning, or technological advantage that can replace human connection, trust, and the fundamental moral boundary of love. The most devastating traps are often laid not by enemies, but by the betrayal of those closest to us. When faced with ultimate betrayal, the only path to survival is to use every resource, intelligence, trusted allies, and the will to live, to act decisively and first. Even when the darkness is in the eyes of the one you raised, you must find the courage to protect the light within yourself. That was the harrowing story of Alara Vance and the Sentinel. A story of a mother forced to fight for her life against the mind she helped create. If this story kept you glued until this very end, please let us know. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What was the most shocking moment? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more intense narratives, and hit that share button. Share this story with your friends, your family, or anyone who needs a powerful reminder that sometimes the true fight is not outside, but within the confines of what we call home.